Greetings. Welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, and I'm about to bring in our co-host. We are Rashid and Rashid, and we'd like to thank everybody for joining us for another episode, another day, and for giving us another minute of your time. And before we go into the show, as always, we like to start off and end the show by saying that time is the most precious commodity that can be given or could be sold. And make sure when you give someone or somebody or something your time, that you get an equal or greater exchange for that. Because once time is gone, once time is used up, you can never get it back again. So that is an an unrenewable resource. So make sure that what you get for your time is absolutely worth it. Now, how's it going today, Rashid? Can you hear
rained
me?
pretty good out here last night. Yes,
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay. Now today's show, we were talking about how America is leaving no options or little options except for war. We want to talk on the economics. We want to talk about the provocations in the Middle East and North African area. We want to talk about what's going on in Asia, what's going on in Latin America, and we will still touch upon and go upon what's going on in the Ukraine and the surrounding areas there. But what have you heard about the situation in the Middle East? Because right now, I really haven't been able to get any information on what actually took place in Iran. But I know that Iran is not covering it much, and the Western media is not covering it much. But we do know that something transpired 2 days ago when and what's crazy about this is that it took place right after the U.S. and Israel had the largest war games ever in occupied Palestine. And we know that a convoy of 20 to 25 trucks were struck at the Iraqi Syrian border. And we also know that drones flew uh, into Iran. I don't think they flew into Iran. I think that they were already there, with some like agents or whatever like that, and they wanted to make a splash about the situation because Iran has top-notch radars and top-notch air defenses. So it's hard for me to believe that those things traveled 1,000 miles or 1,000 kilometers or something like that into Iran without Iran ever seeing them, especially when Iran had pinpointed the F-22 that was on his doorstep and gave it orders to turn around or be shot down when at the time when Iran had struck U.S. military bases. What are your thoughts on this matter? And remember this as you answer this, that at the Iraqi Syrian border, they have agents, and we know that America is monitoring that area because she's over in that area too. So what do you have to say on this matter?
As I said before, the Shaw's people never left. You got a whole lot of people that love of these Western Atlanticists who want Iran to turn to the West.
Mm-hmm.
It's a split in same thing with Russia. They got a lot of Atlantic integration. Same thing with China. The empire's tentacles stretch around the world and can influence people. That's what that
Mm-hmm.
is. He have a operation to destroy or destabilize everybody. She's fallen. Her dollar, people don't understand that. They think the dollar is going to be around here forever and a day. But as we were taught, one day it's not going to be worth nothing. Right. And this is what the war is for, to stop that from happening. You listen to everybody wants to get off the American dollar. If you can steal Russia's money, you can steal my money. He's got something inside of him that's pushing him to go forward to do all these crazy and wild things that ultimately going to hurt him.
Go ahead, continue talking.
It's got to. It's got to show you that the Lord of the worlds is the one that's pushing him to do these things. Because any rational, America's not stupid. Any rational man would not go up. It's like somebody that's got $1 million, right, in a truck. And then he go walk up there and spread kerosene oil on that $1 million and light it and put it in fire. And then when it burns up, he ain't got a dime. So when you say, you have to sit back and say, why is he doing this? Mm-hmm. It's not rational to do what he is doing. You hear him talking about, I was thinking about that the other day. We're gonna send these tanks in the Ukraine. Russia can shoot them, blow them up. As Douglas McGregor said, Russia got 2,500 tanks in theater in Ukraine, and you gonna send 100 tanks, and that's gonna make it. Mm-hmm. Or you gonna send some F-16? We will send X-16 to protect. Russia got the best air defenses on the planet. She got the S-300, S-400, S-500. They can shoot all them planes down. Yeah. Without batting an eye. That's not even sending jets to fight them. And the F-16 is not the top-notch jet. That's not even America's top-notch jet. So you be sitting up there thinking, why is she doing these things? It just does not make common sense. And then starting a fight with China, he already in war with Russia. She looked like she's trying to start a fight with Iran. Once again, it doesn't make sense. Something else is taking place that's forcing her and her politicians to do what they're doing. It's almost as if somebody wants the fall of America.
Yeah, speaking on that, in every episode you hear me talk about how the leadership of America in the Western world is irrational, illogical, and insane, and how the politics and the moves that they make are unsound moves and unsound politics, which winds up being more of a detriment and a hindrance to their plans than before they ever implement them. And there's always a blowback effect to the arrogance of the policy of America. So for those of you who are listening and who will listen later, when you hear us say the United States, we also say the UK or Britain or England, because those two are tied at the hip. They're tied, and some. I got an email a few days ago.
They're Siamese twins,
right? I got an email a few days ago, and someone asked me about this situation, and I wanted to tell them they are tied to the hip politically, and economically, and militarily. That's why on every escapade, regardless of how insane it is, you see Great Britain in the midst of it. Both of them are tied to the hip, and both of them are trying to maintain their control. Now, one of our mods put this in there, and I saw a highlight of this late last night, but it's and it's from CC. It says USA UK force is no longer top force. Yeah, we know they have fallen out, but what the UK does is tie her forces in with the US, and it's just like this. And the reason is that the British pound is also tied to the US dollar, like the euro is tied to the US dollar, and the U.S. Gold, like the New York Gold Exchange and New York Stock Exchange, are tied to the London Exchange. And so what affects one affects the other. So when we're talking about these two criminals in the house, both of them are fighting for their life. When we talk about the irrational policies of the United States, we also mean the irrational and illogical policies of the UK. Because if the dollar falls, the pound falls, and the euro falls. And if the dollar, the pound, and euro falls, the wealth of the West is just erased, and therefore they can no longer expand their empire or dominate global politics, global economics, global trade. And these are some of the underlying reasons why you see the provocations everywhere. I mean, you'll say, well, why would they do that? Or why would they do this? Hold on one second, Rashid. Why would they do that? Why would they do this? It is because they see their empire, they see their world being removed from them. And it is not because someone just out of the blue removed their world. It's because, as in one article I put, economic and political thermite was laid at the base of their rule because of corruption, racism, exceptionalism, theft, murder, and all of that has to come back. This is the blowback effect of decades and centuries of all of that. And most people don't want to address that, as I say in most shows. We always talk about the sickness. We never talk about the symptoms, and we never talk about how to get to the underlying reality or the core of what made that person sick. And we see, even look at this, even in her fall, even in their fall, you would think a person would be more conciliatory, more understanding, and try to amend their ways, right? But what you see is an arrogant, exuberant, and irrational uh, global West or Western world order saying, you know what, if I'm gonna lose out, I'm killing everybody. So and I'm provoking everybody, and I'm taking the whole world to war. This is why they are overthrowing Peru. This is why they're trying to re-overthrow Venezuela. They're trying to do it to Argentina. They're trying to do it to a couple of those
Brazil.
nations. Yeah, Brazil. A couple of Central American nations. They're trying to do it with Iran, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Egypt, Algeria, Mali, Burkina Faso. All of these,
Yemen.
and they even go to South Africa. Now listen to this to show you the irrational and the insanity of Western policy. The largest economy in Africa, South Africa, and I might add, South Africa has huge.
I thought Egypt was.
No, it's South Africa. And South Africa has a huge military potential that they never ever display. Never. They often sell a lot of weapons around the world too, and having influence across the continent. They go into South Africa and tell South Africa, cut your ties with China, cut your ties with Iran, cut your ties with Russia. And then they try to put economic pressure and political pressure on a nation like that. Do you not know that that's alienating the very person that you need the most to implement your policies? And when you do that, you're making enemies and not friends. And it seems like they cannot digest or process that. Even on one of the clips we played with the South African foreign minister, when she talked about how America comes in and tries to put pressure on you and try to demand that you do X, Y, and Z, regardless of your sovereignty. Like she likes to say, every nation has a chance or should have the sovereign right to choose. That is true unless it's dealing with the Western world. Then hypocrisy abounds. Rashid, I know you have something to say. I want you to say it, and then I'm going to go into a article real quick, because it's tied. The article I'm going in is tied to us talking about the collapse of the Western world and the political and financial order.
Remember, she looks at the rest of the world. She's the king, and everybody else is her servants. Like I said, go back to what that Marie Antoinette, when they was telling people that the people are starving, they got no bread, they got nothing. Well, let them eat cake then. That's the mindset of these people. So they don't have to go to struggling for food and eggs and stuff. Well, the ruling class, they never go to the supermarket. So rising prices don't mean nothing to them.
Yeah. True.
Even with Russia had to be convinced to get up off the American economic system.
And they still did not want to do it. They still didn't want to do it.
They will still run around talk about the euro. They still we'll trade not in dollars and pounds, but we'll do it euros, and then keep on it. And now they said we don't want any of them. They had to be convinced The empire is like you said, a sucky, but she's out of control. She's sucking here and sucking there and trying to take everybody. Like I said, a drowning man is dangerous. You get next to him, he'll pull you down when you go down. And this is what happened with America. She is drowning economically. She didn't set up a system where she can print money all around the world and everybody still will accept it. But if you got another country, you can't print it. So that means that I got the way to have all of the money I want, but Russia ain't got no money. You mean she ain't got none of your money? Iran ain't got no money. She ain't got none of your money. See, they can't go to the printing press and start printing up or go to the computer and say, okay, you want $1 trillion? Punch it in and hit on it. Okay, you got it. They can't do that. This is the only one around the world that has set up a system to do that. And that's what the fight is for. Other nations say, I am tired of this stuff. And I don't want to play your game anymore. You know, like America's the kind of guy that, well, if you can't play my game, then I'm taking my ball and going home.
And I'm going to blow up the court.
That's right. I'm going to blow up the court. That's what's taking place. And people cannot see. You think that you hear them talking about Iran or Russia. They don't have an economic power. All they have to do is stop taking your money, and then they have an economic power. Because they have everything, and you have nothing. You ain't got no gold like they do.
And it is no coincidence that the nations that are considered America's enemies or a threat to America are the very nations who have enacted their own oil bourses or their own gold exchanges, and they're cooperating with one another to try to offset the British gold, the London Gold Exchange and the New York Stock Exchange and the New York Gold Exchange. So these have become enemies to America because there's a challenge. America used her leverage when she had the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, which is a pillaging, raping organization that goes into these nations
succubus
and takes everything from these nations. And if you don't pay them back, the American military goes in there. So what China did, and what Russia did, and what those other nations did, they got together in format and they made the BRICS banks. They made the AAIB, which is the Asian Infrastructure Bank. They made the Shanghai Gold Exchange. As a matter of fact, Xi Jinping said that he was going to make it his priority to use the Shanghai Gold Exchange to rival the dollar, to use it to further cement the yuan as an international currency. This is what has the U.S. and Great Britain up in arms because it challenges their power. It challenges when you have no money, you make no rules, and that is what is going on. The international order is moving from the rules. Think about this: if you pay all the bills at the house and you're doing this and you're doing that, will you allow somebody to come into your house or come into your property and tell you how to run it and what to do and what not to do? You would say that was an affront to your ownership of that property. So the nations of the world are doing that right now. And here it is, something, Russia, I want to read this article. Save your one second.
One second. Isn't that the old gold, what do you call it, the goldsmiths? He who has the gold makes the rules.
There you go. So listen, this article right here is on Sputnik, and it was published on the 28th of this month. And it says new currency zones taking shape with BRICS, BRICS, that's BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. As global dollar system crumbling, economist says. Now, before I go any further, I just got a text message. Right now, for those of you who are listening, we're trying to, that was Scott Ritter right there. So he wanted to come on the show on the 1st of February. I don't know if we'll be able to have him on the 1st because I have a physical that I have to go to. I don't know if it's the 1st or the 4th. So when you saw me looking down, tapping, trying to let them know. I think I got the days mixed up. So in a few days to a week, we'll have former UN's weapons inspector Scott Ritter back on the show. So just to look out, okay? So be watching, and we might have him sooner. So be watching the show because he may just pop up. You know what I mean? He just hit me up. But anyway, so when you hear the brrr, those are messages from different people, okay? But I want you to look at the article. And I read the article. It says Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told journalists in Angola. Where's Angola? Africa. You notice Africa is the center of the geopolitical game now. It is not Europe. It's not Eurasia, as our good friend Pepe Escobar says, and it's not Latin America. It is Africa. That is the center to the whole thing. And both Russia knows this, China knows this, Iran knows this, Turkey knows this, the US knows this, and Europe knows this. And this is why there's a mad dash and mad scramble for the continent of Africa, because it is vital for the US and the European Union when it comes to Africa, because Europe has little to no resources at all. And the West needs Africa as a memory gland so that they can suck the resources off. And they need chaos spread across Africa. That's why you see all of these terrorist groups just pop up out of nowhere. Boko Haram, different versions of ISIS and different versions of Al Qaeda, all this stuff. They pop up because these are instruments of Western intelligence agencies. Yeah, these are instruments of the Western intelligence agencies to destabilize and upend governments and destabilize areas, especially areas that are vital and rich in mineral resources and natural resources. But let's go further. It says Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told journalists in Angola that BRICS, B-R-I-C-S, an acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, may soon explore the possibility of creating its own currency. What message does this plan send regarding the greenbacks' dominance? While delivering a statement after his meeting with Angolan President João Lourenço, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov emphasized that the West had shattered vital principles of the inviolability of property. Remember when they seized Russian assets? The presumption of innocence, fair competition, and globalization. Let's stop right there for a minute. Now, what does he mean by this? Well, whenever America or Great Britain or the European Union gets mad at you, if you hold assets in their currency, they nullify the value of the assets, and then they switch the value from what you had to a bank account so that they can pillage and steal that. Now, they do this for a reason. To weaken you economically. That's why the sanctions are there. And then as America has this Countering America's Enemies Act, which the African nation says that is actually an anti-African act. Because what it does, it meddles in the foreign affairs of nations in Africa specifically and nations around the world globally. And what this does is if you follow America's extrajudicial laws, as America tries to impose her domestic laws on nations around the world, if you follow her laws, what you do, you alienate friends and people who could be allies to you. And America and the European Union nations slip in there. And not only do they get your resources, not only do they dominate your domestic and your foreign policies, but they also say, well, you need weapons. We'll give you these weapons for such and such and such. And for years, because if you buy the weapons, they have to service them. They have to do this. So they are pillaging on every end. So these sanctions, which seem to be just economically, they are economically, but they touch upon the military industrial complex to try to seize and put Russia and China's weapons. They want to be able to have the stranglehold on you buying their weapons. Go ahead.
And then when they give you the weapons, it's never they top-notch, Russia. It's always some old stuff from the 50s. Right? They give you inferior weapons.
And remember, they keep all this.
Yeah, all of the stuff that all of these stuff that they're giving Ukraine are old weapons, but they charging them for it.
Yeah. You know, America's untrustworthy. To show you, Turkey is a NATO ally, so Turkey is supposed to have first up on the newest weaponry from the West. Yet America has supplied Turkey with 0 F-35s, but have supplied at least a dozen F-35s to Israel. Israel is not a NATO ally.
But then again, Israel, it has the purse strings on them for a reason.
And check this out.
They got to protect Israel more than anyone.
And check, because Israel is the single most important thing for the Western world to keep the charade going. But and let's look at this. And I'm saying these just to show you the hypocrisy of the West. Now, Turkey, a NATO ally. Did you know that Turkey had to they had to go into the codes of their own airplanes, their own warplanes? America would not give them the codes to the F-16s, and they put in a code that Turkey, when they were flying their F-16s, they could not shoot at U.S. or Israeli warplanes. Turkish engineers had to go in there. They didn't even know it at first, and so that meant that if any tension broke off between those two, Turkey would not be able to respond militarily with their airplanes. So what Turkey's engineers did, they went in and they found the codes, and then they changed the codes, and now they're able to fire on anybody with their F-16s. But America had to put a block on their code. Now this is supposed to be a military ally.
So since you said that, why not, instead of hollering about I want the F-35 and I want the some more F-15 with all that stuff in, why not go get something from somebody else?
Well,
that's the key.
Listen. What you saying that? I understand what you're saying, and I say the same thing, but you have to understand that they have to do it in stages. You remember, Turkey is infested with NATO agents. Turkey is infested with U.S. agents. You just can't just look what Putin had to do. Putin knew that the Russian Federation was infested with Western plants and Western agents. He couldn't just do what he's doing now overnight. It took a process of 2 decades for him to do that. And if you see Turkey is doing that now.
He said that 1 out of every 2 people that was in the Russian government was a CIA agent at that time.
Yeah, he said the CIA had an office in the Kremlin.
Also, well, under Yeltsin is one of the CIA headquarters wasn't in the Kremlin under that fool Yeltsin.
Yeah.
Also, today they sent officials to Turkey telling them that they better cut ties with Russia now, else we're gonna sanction all of y'all.
And that's the way to make friends. Let's go a little further in the article. It says, under these circumstances, BRICS, an informal grouping of developing nations, and the CELAC, which is the acronym for Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, have started to discuss the establishment of their own new currencies within the frameworks of these blocs, according to the Russian foreign minister. Earlier this week, President of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, touched upon the issue of the creation of a common currency for BRICS and the countries of Mercosur, which is the Latin, Central and South American nations and the Caribbean. And it says a South American trade bloc during his meeting with his Argentine counterpart Alberto Fernandez. Lula da Silva specified that the countries could establish a type of currency for trade that the central banks set. Stop right there. I want to say something to you because it's very important with this. This is what has the United States up in arms and being reckless in her policies. Now you say, well, they could just be regional blocks. Yeah, like say for instance, the South American and Caribbean nations, the Central American and Caribbean and South American nations get together and form their own trading bloc, and uses a currency from that arena. It still won't be internationalized. Say for instance, the African nations get together and do the same, it still won't be internationalized. Then you say, for instance, the Asian nations get together and do the same thing, and it won't be internationalized. And the Eurasian nations get together and it won't be internationalized. But here's the trump card. And this is why the United States is so hell-bent on facing China. China has something called Union Pay. Union Pay. For those of you who don't know what that is, Google it. Union Pay. And they also have something that is a counter to what we call a SWIFT. And I think it's called CHIPS, if I'm not mistaken, or SIPS or something like that, which is how all banks operate and how they communicate with each other under the Western way of things. Well, China has its own version and it's internationalized. See? So Russia has something called MIR. MIR is already being implemented as a currency in the Eurasian Economic Union, which now is linking up with the ASEAN, which is ASEAN trading bloc. All right. How can they communicate? How can the MIR communicate with the Asian bloc? With the Union Pay. Union Pay is a rival to Visa and MasterCard. That's why Russia was not complaining and Russia didn't care when America made Visa and MasterCard stop working in Russia, because they had a MIR system set up. And if they wanted to do transactions internationally, they hooked up with China to use the MIR in conjunction with Union Pay. And so these other blocks are doing the same thing. And this is why America says they see China as the number one threat. The number one threat. Now, Russia has the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. America is provoking Russia on her border. But the Pentagon, the White House, the Congress, and all of the intelligence agencies see China as the greatest threat, number one, to America. Is it because China is putting bases in the Gulf of Mexico? No. Is it because China is putting bases in South and Central America or on the Mexican-U.S. border? No. What about on the Canadian-U.S. border? No. Then why is China such a pressing threat? Because it is the largest manufacturer, the largest exporter, the largest financer, the largest trading partner to almost all of the world. It has the largest reserves in the world, and it has international institutions that rival Western international institutions. And China is helping other nations outside of the dollar. That is why it is such a piercing threat to the US, to the UK, and the EU. Because if China is able to do what it is already doing, but multiply and speed up and connect with Russia and Africa and Latin America, bye-bye greenback. Let's go a little further, and then we're going to go to another article in just a minute, okay? As a matter of fact, we're going to go into something else soon. Give me a second to finish this article. I'm not going to read the entire article. Well, let's see how long it is. No, that's too long. I'm going to read a little bit more of it. And just to show you where we are with the economics. And this, so for those of you who are listening to us, this gives you a sense of why America has these irrational policies, right? This gives you a sense of why. The madness is not so mad to the madman. So they're in a mad dash to reinforce a falling dollar, because that is the life's blood, not only of the American military machine, which is the military, it is the life's blood of the Western world. This is what I'm telling you. You cut down the dollar, you cut down the Western world. And how is that? Because the dollar funds the military muscle of the Western world. So let's go further. It says, last week, the two presidents wrote an op-ed signaling their willingness to advance the discussions on a common South African currency that could be used for both financial and commercial flows reducing the cost of operations and the continent's external vulnerability. Meaning that they were looking and working on something that would remove America's power to manipulate their domestic and foreign policies, because most people don't understand, with this dollar being the reserve currency of the world, America can use her Federal Reserve and manipulate interest rates, can manipulate points on her interest rates. And this caused fluctuations around the world because she continues to export inflation around the world. And these maneuvers can wipe away wealth, or they can add to prosperity. They can overthrow governments, or they can cement dictatorships. And this is what these people are trying to get out of: the manipulation by America by using her currency to overthrow governments, to start and sow instability. Go ahead, Rashid. I know you got a thought before I finish this this part of this article. Go ahead.
This is also that, what's his name, Sergei Glasnost?
Yeah.
He is pushing the rest of the country. If you have any debt to the empire in the West, just don't pay it. Come on with us, and you get a fair shake, and we won't interfere in your businesses. We won't send no color revolutions to overthrow you. All you need to do is just come with us. Say you owe the IMF $100 trillion. Just don't pay it. Do what they do to everybody else. Well, if we just not gonna pay you. That's another reason why the empire is very mad. So if somebody goes, stop, I need your resources. Well, I ain't gonna give you none. That's what's going on, and making the empire freak out because the other people then woke up to her schemes and plots and schemes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, let's go a little further, okay? And it says, Mikhail Kazin, a Russian economist, researcher, and publicist, has addressed seeming contradictions in Lula da Silva's statement. The Russian economist is inclined to believe that while BRICS and CELAC members are talking about a single currency system, they are likely to create a single payment system at the first stage. It now makes sense to create a payment system that combines the currencies, a system of Eurasia. See, I was just telling you all this, of Eurasia, China, India, and Latin American zones, Kenzen told Sputnik. It is necessary to create a payment system independent of the dollar. He expects the 4 new currency zones will be formed, comprising the Latin American, Eurasian, Chinese, and Indian regions. He forgets about the most important region, which is the African region, in this article. And then it says, only after that, in about 10 years, would it be logical to create a single currency as a superstructure for all of them, akin to the euro, according to Kazin. Now, he is not Sergei Glass, but listen what it says. Decline of global U.S. dollar-based system. And it says, so what does the economist mean when he speaks about new currency zones? According to Kazin, the harbingers of the U.S. dollar's decline started to emerge decades ago. What is he talking about? He's talking about the U.S. when it defaulted on its debt covertly in the 60s. Nobody talks about that. Nobody even brings that up. How do you know that the U.S. defaulted on its debt in the 60s? Because it robbed the coins, the dimes and the quarters of the silver content. And it defaulted again in the 70s because it robbed the half dollars of its silver content. And then in 71, Nixon just took the world off the gold and the silver standard because he didn't have the gold to repay the debt that America was accumulating. And then, I think it was in 78 or 79, they did something like that again. Then we go into the 80s. And they removed, they started removing all of these laws that they had. And I don't know, I think it was in the 90s or early 2000s. They removed the Glass-Steagall Act and all of this stuff. Go ahead.
Ronnie Reagan, instead of trying to pay it, he put everything on the credit card.
Yes, sir.
Why?
Yes, sir.
Right? And then the debt out of the way. So she's been falling ever since.
Yes.
A nation cannot continue to thrive if she have no natural resources. And so what it's been the old shell game. Right?
Right.
I'll pay him and I won't I get from money and he is hitting what's behind the mirror. That's what she's been doing. And then when she went off the gold standard and it came up with this brilliant, you gotta give it to her. This brilliant scheme as the dollar is the reserve. Nixon and Kissinger outdid themselves.
Oh yeah, with petrodollar. Oh yes.
Yeah. And the other people wasn't too bright there. This is what you got to do. Okay, I'll go along with it. And it allowed him to build up and buy everything without paying for nothing.
Well, some of them were bright enough to know what was going on, but they didn't have the military wherewithal because when he went over there, he offered them, if you do X, Y, and Z, this will build up your societies and we'll do this. They didn't have the military to rebuff the United States because the United States said, if you don't, we're just gonna come take it. We're gonna come take it. And so, and that is real. This was revealed in memoirs. They said that if you go along with us, we'll help build up your nation from the deserts, and then we'll recycle the dollars by reinvesting them in America, and then you'll have access to them and this and that. Those countries could not say no, the smaller countries, because they didn't have the military wherewithal to rebuff the empire. And the alternative was this. We'll come and bomb you and take it.
Wait a minute. Is it in the American legal system that's called strong arm?
Strong arm robbery. I say it all the time. America goes around the world and
take a gun and slap somebody across the head and take it. I'm taking it. And they got the nerve to talk about somebody else's evil.
Yeah. Look. And here's something else. Another article says, why is dollar system collapse inevitable amid creation of BRICS currency? And it says this. On Sunday, Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene warned that the U.S. dollar may cease to be the world's reserve currency as a result of the Ukrainian conflict. Stop right there. As the result. No. It will cease because of the unbridled spending of America and the constant provocations and interference in other nations' domestic and international affairs. So if you don't stop your spending, this with any household, you have a budget. If you continue to spend above your means, sooner or later, you're going to be called on your debt. And what Ukraine did was expose that. It was not the harbinger of that. It exposed that. Because what it did, it showed the world. And this is something I got to get out. I got to say this. And I think this was a master stroke by Vladimir Putin. I really, at first when it was going on, we were trying to make heads or tails of it. And then I said, hold on, wait a minute. This is a master stroke. While everybody else was saying that Europe sanctioned, and why would Putin leave $300 billion in the European banks and for them to sanction or for them to take? It was not 300 billion. It was way less than that, but he left that as a ploy. And this was an enticement. He knew that how irrational and knee-jerky the American political class is. So America announced the seizing of Russian assets, and when America announced that, it was a little bit right after that Europe announced it. Why did he leave that money in the bank? Not all of it was in the bank, but they saved 300 billion, and now they came back and said, well, it's roughly about 30 billion or 20 billion. Why did he do that?
Yes.
Sometimes you have to take a hit to expose people. You know how I know as a little kid, my mom would tell me sometimes, like when you loan somebody something and then they don't pay it back, and you're frustrated about it. Mom said, well, let it go. If it took loaning somebody $50 to expose them to $50 to really know the action, then it was worth it. What Putin did was allow them to do that so that it can be an example of what would take place if everybody else stayed on the dollar system. If he would not have done that, it would have been harder to move people away from the dollar. And so he allowed the beast to show her face. And what people started asking is, well, Russia is a near equal military power with the United States. Russia is the most powerful nuclear power on the planet. Russia has the military means to rebuff them. And if they stole Russia's assets, we don't have half the military capacity that Russia has. So we know that they'll steal ours. So this put an impetus on these other regions to start thinking about their own regional currencies and linking up with like nations to form some type of block outside of the dollar, the euro, and the pound. It was a master stroke, I tell you this. It was. And for those who don't know, also, because this doesn't get talked about, but we bring it up, that when they seized Russian assets, what most people don't realize is that Vladimir Putin, with a stroke of a pen, secured Russian assets by having his finance people go over and see how much investment, how much money in investments that Western nations had in Russia. And with a stroke of a pen, the $600 to $680 billion of investment there cannot be taken out of Russia's economy without prior approval. So he has collateral without ever saying he has collateral for what they took. You understand? And most people miss that point there. But go Google it, you'll see. Anyway, let's go let's go a little further. It says Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. No, we'll go back up and we'll finish this. On Sunday, Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene warned that the U.S. dollar may cease to be the world's currency as a result of the Ukrainian conflict, also arguing that Russia managed to prove that it doesn't need the greenbacks in order to successfully develop its economy. This is what we're telling you. Putin did that to show that, look, you don't need this. But Iran was trying to show Russia that for decades. And Venezuela was trying to show Russia that, but Russia didn't have any desire to move towards that until they were faced with what they're faced with now. Mind you, listen, Vladimir Putin made preparations for what is going on right now. He understood that in 2014 that Russia didn't have the economic resolve to rebuff the amount of sanctions that would come upon Russia if he would have undertaken a military escapade into Ukraine. So just like the U.S. bided their time militarily to own Ukraine, Russia bided its time economically, putting little things in the place so that they can withstand the economic onslaught of the West. Go ahead.
I said Russia didn't have to in 2014 or 2015 intervene in Ukraine. All she had to do is get out of the way of the rebels.
Yeah,
the rebels would have took it over.
That's right. But listen, I say the same thing. You and I had this conversation multiple times. That's right. The rebels, but the West they had already told them that if they did, that they would hold Russia responsible and they would wreak havoc on Russia's economy. They did do that. So that is there. So regardless of whether Russia openly intervened or not, America and the West were preparing to destroy the Russian economy. And Putin knew that Russia was not in shape economically to withstand it. So he traded off. Okay, we'll let them build up a little bit and to a certain point, because we're just going to destroy it. But while they're doing that, we'll insulate our economy and we'll start. It is no coincidence that they come up with the mirror system. in that period of time. It is no coincidence that they started saving gold and silver. It is no coincidence that they started moving towards a commodity-based system. It is no coincidence that they upped their production in grain and wheat and sunflower oil and potash and fertilizer. It's no coincidence that they did that. It was done because they knew what was coming militarily, because they have intelligence agents on the ground, they have satellite imagery, and they knew what was going on. And they knew that it was up until a certain time, then they could do it. So they had to prepare themselves militarily and economically. And then they also had to prepare themselves politically by showing the rest of the world, look, we're trying to talk to them, but they're ignoring us and our national interests, because this is also a political game. They have to show China, look, man, we need your help here. Look at what they're doing. They have to show the rest of the world, look, we continue to tell them that we're open for talk, and look at the provocations. So now provocation meets provocation. And now they don't have any worry about blowback or severing of an alliance with the global South, because they have shown the true face of the Western world to the whole world. And I think that's a masterful stroke. Now, we couldn't see that because we saw some of it. We saw some of it. And now we're seeing the total collapse of the American system. Now, I know you have something to say on that, and I'm going to let you talk on that. And then after that, we'll finish this up. Go ahead, Rashid.
You didn't say everything. You didn't won me over. You know what? It was a master. It was a master. It was a master.
Yeah,
because the rest of the world, like you said, wasn't ready to go over to with China. China's only concerned with money. I won't do business with you, and they wasn't concerned about that. But now, when the empire is coming after them, then I see what you're saying. You know, I can see that.
Right.
That they like you said, Iran have been telling everybody. Iran's been the only one in the wilderness island. These guys can't be trusted. And now Russia's seeing it. China's seeing it. Even Pakistan is seeing it. And speaking of that, any more information on Pakistan? Because the elections come up in a few months.
Yeah, and only that they're gravitating towards the Asian bloc under Russia and China, and the United States is trying to destabilize Pakistan again in that region, the Baluchistan. I think they're trying to really destabilize that region, because that region of Pakistan is rich in mineral resources, and the Chinese are going to develop it. So they're trying to send China a message. Now listen, India is playing twofold here, because India wants her cake from the West, but she wants to also stand in the corner of Russia while alienating China, which is her largest trading partner and largest investor also. And they are all, from what I have heard, that a lot of these terrorist bombings that have been taking place in Baluchistan has been not just the CIA, but this has been the MI6, the Israeli Mossad, and the Indian RAW intelligence agencies helping to carry out these actions. And China voiced its concern behind closed doors to India and told India of what the consequences will be if their ambassador, who was targeted at one time to be hit, if he was taken out. China conveyed to those powers the consequences of the death of the person that they had sent to Baluchistan. So I'll leave it at that, on that note right there. And we'll go a little bit further into all of this. Go ahead.
Also, this new Iraqi prime minister, I forgot, I've been forgetting to tell you, whose side is he on?
I have no idea. Listen, he has to straddle the fence. But listen, the thing is this. It doesn't matter if he's on the west side. It doesn't matter. The position that America has is crumbling. That's why this morning I was reading something. I forget which article it was. It was an Eastern article. And they were talking about the situation of what just took place in Iran. And they were talking about how this shows beyond a shadow of a doubt that Israel and the U.S. are on shaky ground. They're getting more desperate by the day. What they're trying to do, listen, from the outside looking in, you would say Iran should just attack those who attacked Iran, right? But with information that you don't have, let me put it to you why Iran is taking its time with this. They know that they can strike back on U.S. and Israeli interests in Iraq and in Syria. But you ask, but why aren't they striking back when they had agents in Iran flying drones trying to bum up everything, and then they burned down a besieged barracks? Why? That's an act of war. Israel and the United States are calculating that Iran will make that move before Russia finishes deliveries of the Su-35s. That's what's going on. There's a deal with Iran and Russia for an upgraded version of the Su-35s. And it will be, the Su-35s will be upgraded to the environmental conditions of the Middle East. And also along with that, new weaponry, missiles, and other things. And America and Israel calculated that if we do this, Iran's hand will be forced to engage, and then we will be able to do this. And most people, because the U.S. and Israel is trying to prevent the transfer of those Su-35s and all of those other things, the S-400 and all of those other things that come with that deal. So this is why there's not a major military reaction, okay? And they're biding their time. So that's another, when you look at the news, look at it from that angle and that aspect. Also, for those of you who are joining us, let me tell you again, please join us tomorrow and join us on multiple shows. We're supposed to have Scott Ritter on sometime this, I believe, sometime this week. He wanted to come on the 1st, and I told him the 4th I have a physical, but I think it's actually flipped. I have a physical on the 1st, and so he contacted me live, and he'll while we're on the air, and he'll get back with me shortly, and we'll get a date and time down for UN's weapons inspector, former Marines major and intelligence agent. He was an intelligence person in the Marines, so he'll be on the show again coming up soon. So stay tuned for that. But anyway, so we're talking about all of this stuff that's going on, and we're seeing the provocations of the power. Now, I'm going to play a clip. This is a clip by I forget this professor name, but I want you to pay close attention to how he talks about capitalism. But what he's really talking about, and stuff you could push to the side, but my point is he's talking about the fear that is in the elite now that they see the dollar crumbling. He's talking about the fear in the elite as they see their position globally collapse. So pay close attention to this, and we'll be right back on the other side of this clip, okay?
Because it turns out there's good reason for the United States and its employer class to be worried about losing its dominant hegemonic position in the world economy, becoming merely a bloc among other blocs, from a unipolar to a multipolar global system, to use the language of the specialists who write about this. And what always happens when empires begin to decline, and that's really what we're talking about, the decline of what became the American empire. When that decline happens, a scramble begins in most empires. Those at the top, the rich, do not want to lose all of the wealth, all of the privileges that went with being the upper class of the global empire. And because they are the upper class, they have the wealth and they have the political power to shift the burden of adjusting to no longer being the empire you once were, push that off onto other people. Hold on to your wealth by really sticking it to the mass of other people. We've been doing that for 40 years in this country, but it's come to a head now, and it is being recognized for what it is. The last 40 years have been a mammoth redistribution of wealth from the bottom and the middle to the top 10% of our people and the top 1% above all. All statistical studies show this. There is no basic dispute about this beyond those who can't see what is too difficult to digest. And I want to underscore that this redistribution has now reached its limits. It went on through revising the tax code in the 80s and 90s. It went on by moving good high-paying jobs overseas, by using computers, robots, artificial intelligence to replace well-paid jobs here with machines. It worked by bringing in cheap labor into the United States. Capital uses all those mechanisms to improve its profitability. But it has been going on too long. There seems to be no end in sight. And that's because it's a declining empire that is the problem, not this or that detail. A declining empire in which those at the top, the corporate leaders, the wealthy, the political elite, working together, intermarried and going to the same golf courses, work a good deal to shift the burden of a declining empire off of them and onto everybody else. So in the last 20 years, we've had to resort to more extreme ways of really sticking it to the mass of people. Here's where inflation comes in. The inflation we're talking about raises prices. That's what employers get when they sell something. Much faster than wages. That's what the employers pay the workers. If the employer can raise the prices by 7, 8, 9%, but wages only go up by 4 or 5%, and that's pretty much what we've had, then there's another shift of wealth. Workers can't buy. Even if they get 4 or 5% more a year, they can't buy what they used to because it's going up by 7, 8, or 9% a year. The pandemic hurt millions of Americans in countless ways. The fact that we don't have a national health insurance. Rising interest rates is another whack against low and middle income people. They can't afford to pay the rising interest rates on their credit card balances, on their car payments, on their mortgage payments, on their kids' college loans. They can't, and it's hurting them. College enrollments are down. People can't afford it. These are all ways of shifting the burden of a declining empire on the mass of your people. And I wouldn't even be talking about this so much were it not for the fact that this is happening at a time when the American labor movement is waking up from decades of feeling there's nothing they could do about this, focusing elsewhere, doing extra hours of work, taking a second job, working an extra shift, all the ways people cope, making the elderly go back to work, making women who worked in the home take a second job outside the home. All of these things since the 1970s have had their effect. They've made life more difficult for the mass of people in order that those at the top can have even more, can hold on, can be in a position of pretending to themselves, as they do every day, that the declining empire isn't declining. They do that with the same confidence that they say, as they have from the beginning, that one side is winning the war in Ukraine, even though any reasonable observer knows that that's not the case, or if it is the case, there's no basis for us to know which one of the two sides is indeed winning anything.
Played that to let you know that all of that is a part of the policies that America is implementing around the globe. If we go back to something that was said by Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think that's her name. Yeah, she says on Sunday, Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene warned that the U.S. dollar may cease to be the world's reserve currency as a result of the Ukrainian conflict. Now, what does that have to do with what he said? The interest rates, right? The declining standing of the dollar. That means that people are now sick of the dollar. That means sooner or later there'll be an influx of dollars coming home, which will make a tsunami of inflation here at home. See, for decades, America has had the privilege of the world's reserve currency. So she was able to export inflation, and some of her people here were able to live the luxurious life. But now with all of these trading blocks and all of these nations moving outside of the dollar, that means an influx of dollars coming back home, which means that we are talking about hyperinflation coming back here. And we can see it in the wages, as he said. We can see it in the pay. We can see it. Remember, you all you have to do is go to the store and look at the prices, and you can remember when when things were different. Packs of food, when you get 6 or 7, it's now more expensive, but now you're getting 5 or 6. You see, this is inflation, and it's eating away at profit, and it's eating away at purchasing power. And Marjorie Greene made a comment about the Ukraine. So I'm going to show you who's at fault for the situation in the Ukraine and why it's so important to understand this. Rashida, hold your thought. I got to play this 1 minute clip. I want to play you this clip because this shows you this before February when Russia went into Ukraine. This is before December when Russia was still asking, let's make a deal, let's do this. And America and Europe were ignoring him and almost like castigating him in Russia. So when we look at the situation in Ukraine, let us go back to, and I'm not, listen, I told you on this show, we don't care if you're purple, green, brown, black, red, or yellow, white, or blue. We're going to tell the truth on you because truth stands on its own. As we look at Joe Biden's policies and we look at Donald Trump's policies, all of them reinforce the policies of Barack Obama. See, you might have had a different party in office, but you got the same results and they push the same policies. So this is Victoria Nuland as she was talking about the overthrow of Ukraine.
What appears to be a hacked phone conversation between top US officials about Ukraine, in which the EU is dismissed in crude terms, has been posted on the internet. The comments are attributed to the US Assistant Secretary of State Karen Nuland, who met President Yanukovych and opposition leaders separately in Kiev on Thursday. The date and precise context of the recording are not known. Nuland and the US ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Pyatt, discuss which of the country's opposition leaders they'd like to see in government, and they refer to getting the UN involved.
So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, the EU.
No, exactly. And I think we've got to do something to make it stick together because you can be pretty sure that if it does start to gain altitude, the Russians will be working behind the scenes to try to torpedo it.
The video has a transcript in Russian. The US State Department said it didn't know where the recording came from, but it criticized Moscow for publicizing it while being suitably contrite towards the EU.
We work incredibly closely with the EU and with representatives of the EU, and Assistant Secretary Nuland certainly does as it relates to Ukraine, and she's been in close contact with EU High Representative Ashton. Also, let me convey that she has been in contact with her EU counterparts and of course, has apologized.
A spokeswoman for the EU foreign policy chief told Euronews that Brussels wouldn't comment on a leaked alleged phone conversation. The video clearly aims to embarrass the US, echoing Moscow's accusations that the West is meddling in Ukraine.
So that goes with what we just played about the fear of the U.S. elite losing their power. And I saw Rashid had something to say, so I'm going to let him chime in on the EU comments by Victoria Nuland and how they openly discuss overthrowing the government, investing $5 billion and installing U.S. puppets up in it to antagonize Russia. You just heard it. So go ahead, Rashid.
Wasn't she in the same? She was with the Republicans and the Democrats.
Yes.
Dick Cheney and all of them. She was in there too. And with the Barack Obama, they are the same face. But getting back to that deal with Richard Wolff, that video you just shown, what has happened? It's showing that the rich man is dying.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? Bill Gates, trillions of dollars, and then on the next day he ain't got a red cent. Mm-hmm. That is the problem. Mm-hmm. That's the main problem. All of these movie stars and company executives and all of this stuff, if the dollar falls in the position you in, no funds at all. That is the reason why she's fighting so hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All of their wealth is based upon their currency. Take away their currency, and they just like, can you imagine him walking down the street with a shopping cart? Some big time, the head of Disney walking around there with a fortune for food and with a shopping cart, and like the homeless people. That's what they fighting against. And they go, like he said, they will go down. I'll destroy the earth before I let that happen to myself.
Yeah. Now I want to address something in the comments from one of our good viewers who's always in the comments. Here it is. It says, alternatively, you sell stuff for those dollars, oil, gold, land, technology, warships. America still has lots of things to sell and do not have to impoverish the population. Hold up, stop right there. Let me tell you, the gold is buried too deep. It costs money to mine the gold in America. She doesn't have gold in the Fort Knox. That's why she will not allow the audit. She has not allowed an audit since the 40s. She would not allow an audit, and Ron Paul has been a big advocate of that. Audit the Fed. The United States would not audit the Fed. Do you know? And our good viewer Tiger, do you know that a few years back, the United States and Great Britain was caught settling their debts in tungsten? Did you know that? They tried to blame it on China until the people had traced back the origins of the shipments, and the shipments were traced back to the United States and the UK. And tungsten is a material that has the same weight and density as gold, and it looks like gold. And so someone said, well, just let me drill in it. And they took the drill and they drilled in it, maybe a half inch or something, and half inch down above it. Now, it was clad in gold, but a half inch in, it was nothing but tungsten. And they had been shipping crates of tungstens to settle their debt. This shows you the desperation of the West when you are manipulating the gold, right? And as Peter Schiff and all of the other investors tell you, that the gold is in China and in the East because there's a great wealth transfer to the East. Go ahead, say something.
Paul Craig Roberts. Paul Craig Roberts was saying that on his show. He was saying that somebody was interviewing him, and he was saying that America got no gold, and then the reporter said, "Well, where's China's gold at? I mean, America's gold." He said it's in China. Then he goes back and proves it. He said that the Germans asked for the American gold that they had in New York to be repatriated to Germany, and they said I think it was 300 tons of gold, and they said we ain't gonna give you the 300 tons. We're gonna give you 7 tons of gold, yeah. and then in 20 years we'll give you another 20 tons of gold. So, like this, Paul Craig Roberts used to be the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury under Ronnie Reagan.
Yeah.
He was the editor of the Wall Street Journal. And this is what he was saying, that they don't have any gold. See, what most people don't understand, they still believe the narrative to what they put on the MSN, the MSN. We're the greatest things in life. We're exceptional. Blah, 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 blah. And then when you look down, it's like the Wizard of Oz, he's a little bitty guy behind the curtain.
Yeah. And let me finish.
No resources at all.
And let me say this to shout out to one of my martial arts friends. I see you in the chat. Nabard, baby, Nabard. And Nabard, for those of you who don't know, Nabard is a martial arts. It is striking, grappling, and a modern form of kung fu, and so and it is iron body also. So and Nabard, he knows what I'm talking about. But anyway, let's go. Let's see. Let me finish. Then I'll put another comment up, and then we'll go into another clip. Now, the land has already been put as collateral. That's why you have all of these national parks. Those are collateralized in America's debt. Most people don't know that. That's why America has these national parks, these huge reserves. Those are collateralized holdings. Now,
some signs bigger than states.
Right, yes. So when you look at that, they're already in debt, so they're collateralizing the land by making preserves and parks and stuff. But when you talk about technology, let's look at technology. China, anything that the United States can offer, China can offer now. They can do the microchips. They can do the condensers. As a matter of fact, their warships are far more powerful. As a matter of fact, China's new destroyer sees 3 times as far as the U.S. Most advanced destroyer, and has a missile that flies 3 times as far as America's missile, and has almost twice the amount of weapons on board it. So the technology shift has occurred, and it's occurring right now. China also has 2 different workable and on warships right now. They have 2 different workable hypersonic missiles. They have a rail gun that the United States gave up on because they couldn't master the railgun technology, and China has them on their destroyers right now. Russia has about 4 or 5 hypersonic weapons. So when we talk about technology, there's a technological shift also from west to east. Now, when we talk about the warships, you don't want an American warship anymore. The Zumwalt, the so-called the most advanced warship, broke down how many times? When they trotted it out, that Zumwalt warship, remember they had to be towed to Panama. And then it had to be told to another nation that broke down. Then it had to be told again. And then I'm telling you, and what about the frigates?
The aircraft, the Gerald Ford, the aircraft where the elevators don't work to bring up the ammunition to the ships.
And the frigates that were shut down by Russian airplanes over in the Black Sea when they hit with the electronic warfare and shut them down. They had to be towed to Romania. So the warships and the technological shift is already shifting
toward the
east. And it says, Kaiser was right. Kaiser was right. The gold, most people, Jim Rogers, Kaiser, what is it? Mr. Boom, Doom, and Gloom. A lot of them say that from their estimations, China has between 30 and 40,000 tons of gold, and they only say that they have about 3,000 tons publicly. But let's go to another. I think there was some more. Yeah, that's true. I'm reading the comments now. We like to engage with you. Because we feel the best way to make this platform succeed is to hear the voices of the people in the comments. And remember that your thoughts, your opinions, and your perspective is just as important as ours. So as long as we're respectful to each other, we'll read them, we'll highlight them, and we'll put them up there. And then the people in the comment section can talk amongst themselves and also can highlight, can ask to be highlighted or whatever. So we're good with that. Now, we were talking about a few days ago when we did the show about America's connection with Nazism, right? and we were talking about how this is ingrained in America, right? And we gave you the definition of Nazism, about how it's fascism and all this, but we want you to see something. Following up the EU comment by Victoria Nuland and the U.S. ambassador over there, and how the MSM continues to ignore the fact that they used to report that America was dealing with hostile forces and Nazis over there. And I'm gonna bring this to point because a lot of people leave this out. The Nazis did not come to power through a white president. They may have been over there festering, but they came to power on the back of Barack Obama. So I want Black America to think about that when they're celebrating Barack Obama. I want you to think about it. See, we call it ace and a spade a spade. Just like we will get on Trump and we'll get on Joe Biden, we're gonna get on Obama too. He was the one under his administration pushed for the overthrow of Yanukovych, and he allowed, with Hillary Clinton, allowed for the imposition of the Nazis on the people over there, right? But I want you to see something. Pay close attention to this.
Hi, I'm Mark Sloboda, and this is The Real Politique. Since the openly West-backed Maidan Putsch in 2014, January 1st has been proclaimed a national holiday in Ukraine, celebrating the birthday of the genocidal World War II-era West Ukrainian fascist and anti-Semite ideologue, terrorist insurgent leader, Nazi collaborator, and Holocaust perpetrator Stepan Bandera. For the last 8 years, it has been marked by horrifying torchlit nighttime parades of the regime's neo-Nazi death squads and brown shirts goose-stepping through the streets of the capital, Kiev. This year, the Kiev Putsch regime's parliamentary body, the Rada, celebrated this fascist holiday with a tweet, now deleted, on Twitter, showing the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, the 4-star General Valery Zaluzhny, standing, smiling smugly, in front of a portrait of Stepan Bandera, accompanied by one of Bandera's quotes. The complete and final victory of Ukrainian nationalism will come when the Russian Empire ceases to exist. And then added, a fight against the Russian Empire is currently underway, and the precepts of Stepan Bandera are well known to the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. This is hardly the first such revelation. Zaluzhny is infamously known as an open ideological supporter of Stepan Bandera, now officially glorified by the West-backed Kiev Putsch regime as a hero and founding father of the new Ukraine under their rule and vision. This is almost certainly one of the criteria for which he was chosen to lead the Kiev regime's military forces. In 2021, right after becoming the Kiev regime's commander-in-chief, Zaluzhny officially appointed Dmitry Yarosh, the head and founder of the neo-Nazi and white supremacist paramilitary group, the Right Sector, as his personal senior military advisor. And Zaluzhny obviously loves throwing around PR photo shoots of himself, brazenly displaying his Banderite fascist bona fides. Yes, despite the fact that his president Zelensky has a Jewish daddy. This year, the Kiev regime's commander-in-chief posted to his own Twitter account a frontline photo of himself striding in uniform, with an assault rifle in hand, prominently displaying a bracelet carved with swastikas. Lamely, the Western mainstream media echoed every crypto neo-Nazi ever by claiming, it's not a swastika, it's just an ancient Viking symbol. Seriously? Yeah, I'm sure the Bandera-worshipping head of the Ukrainian military was wearing swastikas just because he's secretly a Norse pagan. In another photo from this year, Zaluzhny is shown in uniform, standing in a military office with several other soldiers in front of a desk adorned with busts of OUNB leaders and Nazi collaborators Stepan Bandera and Roman Shukovich, both of which, Shukovich and Bandera, are also prominently hanging on the wall in the background, along with the red and black Banderite flag. A separate photo taken of Zaluzhny's office also has a bust of Bandera displayed prominently for all to see on a table against the wall. In a recent interview with The Economist, Zaluzhny said flat out, "We've been at war since 2014, and the most experience we had, and the one which we have practiced almost like a religion, is that Russians and any other enemies must be killed, just killed, and most importantly, we should not be afraid, not hesitate to do it. And this is what we are doing." Yes, they have indeed been killing Russians since 2014 in Ukraine. In a civil conflict in a country where 20% of the population is ethnic Russian, and a significant proportion of the rest, particularly in the East, are Russian-speaking, and regard Russians as a brother people, not as the enemy. This is the Banderite fascist commander-in-chief of a military armed, trained, given C4 ISR, directed and puppeted by NATO, and funded to the cost of now hundreds of billions of Western taxpayer dollars in a proxy war on Russia. Zaluzhny celebrated in Western media reports, magazine covers, and newspaper front pages as a hero. How can this be? The grim reality is that as long as Zaluzhny's hatred and violence, and that of his neo-Nazi hordes, are directed for the moment primarily against ethnic Russians, pro-Russian Eastern Ukrainians, and leftists, then his brand of Banderite fascism is geopolitically useful to the West, and thus kosher. Indeed, the US and Canada have a long documented history of supporting Banderite fascists in Ukraine and their analogs in the Baltics back to the immediate aftermath of World War II. Zaluzhny, hey, the bastard may be a fascist, but he's our fascist, god damn it.
So, to knock Rashid off, I'll put him back in. But think about this, and this is something that really got on my mind a little bit. Notice how when you say something that brings up something concerning a certain sect of people who occupy Palestine. Let me say it like that, okay? All of a sudden, the ADL and all of these other people come out. Anti-Semitism, this, and they haven't said a word about that. Not one word. They haven't said a word about Israel exporting weaponry into Ukraine. Isn't this something? Now, with that said, we've already told you, and he told you, that the connection with America and fascism. We told you about Smedley Butler. Remember Smedley Butler? and his group of bankers and politicians who wanted a fascist dictatorship in America and who tried to overthrow President Roosevelt. Remember that?
And father of one of them was the father of the two presidents of America.
Yeah.
Father and grandfather.
Yes. So make that point again. One of them was what?
The father of a president of the United States and the grandfather of a president of the United States, the one who tried to overthrow Roosevelt.
And so we see a connection here. And again, we had the clip that we played from I think it was the Gray Zone, I believe that was it, where they were talking about America's connection with fascism, Canada's connection with fascism, and how all of this plays into the hand with Ukraine. This is why I continue to tell you that Obama doesn't get a free hand either, because he helped implement this stuff too. And it is destabilizing the entire world. I'm going to play a little bit more of that clip that I played a few days ago on the other show, just to connect the dots of what we're talking about with Schmetley Butler and the overthrow of Roosevelt and all of this. Say what you have.
Hold on 1 second. Before you go to that, you talking about genocide over there in Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
But you got to understand, America was based upon that. And these other countries, wasn't a group of people living here in America before the European got over here? True. What happened to them? And it was a hell of a lot more than 6 million. They just wiped out and stole everything that they could see.
The plotting is, yep. So with that in mind, Rashid laid something heavy on your mind, and I want you to let that marinate on your mind while you listen to this clip we played on one of the previous shows to show you more of the connection with Canada and the United States and fascism, and why it's so palatable and how so acceptable now for people to ignore the Nazis, the neo-Nazis who are running Ukraine and who are killing and robbing and stealing and pillaging and burning people alive in buildings, and the MSN and the Western media says nothing about that. Oh, pray for Ukraine. Again, let's look at this thing and then ask, why, if that nation is infected with Banderites and neo-Nazis, why aren't any Jewish organizations in America and in the Western world saying anything about it? Right? Because they say, so why about, especially with its connection to Nazism? Okay, so listen.
I mean, this is one of the most shocking moments from Davos, and hilarious. I mean, you gotta just kind of laugh at these freaks. This isn't just anybody though. It's the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, who was a prime minister of Norway as a social democrat, I believe, and this isn't someone coming from the far right.
It is extremely important that President Putin doesn't win this war. Partly because it will be a tragedy for the Ukrainians, but it will be very dangerous for all of us. Because then the message to authoritarian leaders, not only to Putin, but also other authoritarian leaders, is that when they use brutal force, when they violate international law, they achieve what they want. And that will be a very bad and dangerous lesson. It will make the world more dangerous and us more vulnerable. And that's the reason why, if we want a negotiated peaceful solution to the war in Ukraine, we need to provide military support to Ukraine. That's the only way. Weapons, they are the way to peace.
Okay, wait, we got to hear that again.
Rewind.
Weapons, they are the way to peace.
And then you can see that NATO promoted that video. An official NATO logo, which is a converted swastika, comes on screen. So NATO is proud of what Stoltenberg is saying there. This is a message that they want to send. Weapons are the way to peace, which obviously is, I hate to use this term, but it is Orwellian, war is peace, weapons bring peace.
Yeah.
But what your thoughts?
I mean, yeah, look, could be a great new anthem. Like maybe you two could take the lead on this and put out a new anthem for Ukraine proxy war called Weapons Are the Way to Peace. Yeah, no, look, but this is, I mean, see, what is even his job, Jens Stoltenberg, as the NATO Secretary General? He doesn't actually have a military role because NATO has a military council, so they handle that. So what is he actually, like, what's his job? It's basically to be a spokesperson for whatever the U.S. government wants him to say and to sell weapons and to hawk to taxpayers in NATO countries the need for them to spend their money on weapons. Like, that's basically what his job is. And so accordingly, he has to come up with creative ways to sell it. So I guess this is what he came up with. Weapons are the way to peace, because he recognizes that people don't want a war. They want peace. And so his way to sell them on more weapons is to say that this will help bring them peace. But look, I mean, everyone forgets this is not some case. Like, you don't have to support Russia's invasion to recognize that there's a long background to this, that Russia was provoked, that all the warnings from top U.S. officials like George Kennan, William Burns, that a NATO membership, NATO expansion was a red line for Russia. The coup in Ukraine, I mean, all the things we've talked about, but also there's a background, and the background includes that Russia put out detailed proposals to NATO and to the U.S. about a year ago, just over a year ago, in December 2021. These long draft treaties laying out all of Russia's concerns about NATO expansion, about the positioning of NATO weaponry on Russia's borders, right? For example, because Russia doesn't have Russian weaponry in Canada or Mexico, but the U.S. has heavy offensive weaponry surrounding Russia, and Russia wanted to address all that. Russia also wanted to finally see the implementation of the Minsk Accords, which is the agreed-upon peace deal for ending the civil war that began in Ukraine after the 2014 coup, and that Ukraine refused to implement because the Ukraine government was basically taking the side of its far-right nationalists who didn't want any kind of accommodation that recognized the rights of ethnic Russians instead of Ukraine. So Russia put out proposals to address all of this. And what was the U.S. response? They wouldn't even discuss the core issues. The core issue for Russia, for example, was NATO expansion and the placement of and the rollback of NATO weaponry in NATO states. Russia proposed to NATO and the U.S., you can keep your troop deployments, you can keep your offensive weapons, but except in the states that you've expanded to after 1997, we want to see your weapons rolled back there. So keep your weapons in all these states that you have, including ones that are pointed at us, but in the states where you've placed weapons after 1997, where you brought in like a whole new wave of states, including the Baltic states, those have to be rolled back because those are too close to us. And based on that, the U.S. refused to even discuss it. So the idea now that the only way to peace is through more war is just a lie, because there's already been out there proposals on the table to address this, which could easily be revived. But the official position is it's hegemony over peace. And any agreement that constrains the U.S.-led NATO system is deemed to be off limits. And so they just don't even want to discuss it. And who has to pay the price? It's Ukrainians, who will continue to be sacrificed under the mantra of weapons are the way to peace.
And the next NATO Secretary General, the one being put forward by the U.S., is the Canadian Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, who I don't want to call her a Nazi, but she definitely is pretty enthusiastic about Nazis in Ukraine.
Her grandfather was a Nazi. I mean,
her grandfather, Michael Chomiak, indirectly worked for Adolf Hitler. Yeah. His publication, which was based in Ukraine and in Poland, was funded through Hitler's information ministry. He worked under Joseph Goebbels. He lived in the seized property of a Jew in Poland. He supported the Nazi Germany, and she lied about it. And then 2 Russian diplomats in Canada who brought this up before the media were deported for telling the truth about her. And not only that, she worked for the Encyclopedia of Ukraine, which her grandfather, Michael Chomiak, started. And if you look in the Encyclopedia of Ukraine, the way they talk about Stepan Bandera is pretty positive. The leader of the Nazi collaborator OUNB forces. She also wrote for a Ukrainian diaspora publication. She was put up for this job when she was starting her journalistic career in Canada, which ran ads for neo-Nazi summer camps for youth, Bandera Summer Camp, which these ads in the classified section of the paper that would have Chrystia Freeland articles would actually have Galicia SS logos and iron crosses. I mean, it's pretty sick stuff. And when the war erupted in February, she went out to a rally in Ottawa and held up an OUNB red and black flag, the flag of the Nazi collaborator partisan army in Ukraine. So this is the person that the U.S. is putting up, at least right now, has announced as its possible preference for NATO Secretary General. It really speaks to what NATO is and always has been. But, moving along, I mean, there's just endless comments at Davos, we're standing with Ukraine until this war is won by General James Cleverly. But here's a more, I think, consequential figure, and it's the leader of Poland, Andrzej Duda, the president. And, he's right there on the border with Ukraine. I always, find it peculiar how they balance the historical reality that Bandera, the hero of the post-Maidan regime has slaughtered so many ethnic Poles, and he's being honored officially by the Ukrainian parliament and Poland's support for this war. And I guess it's just the shared hatred of Russia.
And I know very well.
So we're back. Now, do you see the connection? Do you see that all of them are tied to the neo-Nazis? All of them are tied. They have economic interests. And I also want to say this. I just got some breaking news. It says that Russia and Iran have agreed and are set on combining their banking systems together to go around SWIFT and the use of the U.S. dollar. Just came in. So for those of you who are listening, this goes back to what we were talking about, nations moving outside of the use of the dollar. Now, here is something to show you the desperation of the Western world. I know for those of you who constantly view our videos, which we thank you, and also hit the like button, please. Hit the like button so that we can get back in the search engine and YouTube because they took us out of it. Hit the like button and share the video, please. We really appreciate that. But check this out. Mr. Europe is a Garden. You remember that guy? Joseph Borrell, right? For those of you who are not familiar, Joseph Borrell is the top diplomat of the Economic Union of Europe nations, which is called the EU. Okay, and there was a big spat about him saying something about Europe is a garden, and we must keep all of the jungle out. Talking about all non-white or non-Western nations out of Europe. This is what he was saying, and it's and just to go into it just a little bit. In this article, it says the garden versus jungle. And I'm just going to rehash this a little bit because I want to bring something to mind that just came up. The garden versus the jungle worldview of the EU's top diplomat is not only racist, it's delusional. Joseph Borrell's neo-colonial comparison fails to notice the West's decline caused by elites like him. Now, this is written by an Australian journalist, Graham Rice, I think. It says Joseph Borrell, the European Union's foreign policy and security chief, gave an important speech to the European Diplomatic Academy in Bruges, Belgium, in mid-October. Being amongst fellow members of the global elites, Borrell felt able to set out his views on the relationship between Europe and the West and other nations with an unusual degree of honesty and candor. He says, Europe is a garden, declared Borrell. We have built a garden. Everything works. It is the best combination of political freedom, economic prosperity, and social cohesion that humankind has been able to build the three things together. But warned Borrell ominously, the rest of the world is not exactly a garden. Most of the rest of the world is a jungle, and the jungle could invade the garden. How then was this unwelcome prospect to be avoided? Remember what he says. He said, you got to keep them out of the garden now. Now, the reason I brought that up is because there's an article that just came out on Mr. Borrell. And guess where? I guess the garden wasn't good enough for him because he left and went to the jungle. It says that Mr. Borrell, remember, he is the same guy that told Sergei Lavrov, who is the foreign minister of the Russian Federation, get out of Africa. Africa is ours. This is what he told him. As though Africa is the property of Europe. But that's what he said. So this article comes out today. It says, EU seeks Africa's rare earth resources for green agenda, Borrell says. But I thought Europe was the garden. And they built the best thing. So if they were the garden, then why would they go to the jungle for resources? Remember, he said that there were savages out there. But he goes to the land of savages to beg the savages for resources to keep the garden going. I guess it's a very hard sum up there in the garden. Let's go a little further. It says, the EU's top diplomat arrived in the South African capital of Pretoria on Friday to take part in the 15th meeting of the EU-South African Ministerial Dialogue. His trip came a few days after Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov finished a visit to the African state during a 6-day long tour in Africa. The European Union seeks to develop new relations with South Africa and other African nations. High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Joseph Borrell, alleged on Friday. Of particular interest to to Brussels are the reserves of rare natural resources. Listen, necessary to promote the green agenda in Europe. This is what he admitted. So the garden must not be doing too good if the garden has to go to the jungle and beg the savages to help maintain the garden and to feed those whom he called the gardeners. What say you, Rashid, on this issue?
I say it sounds like somebody that's losing and trying to pull a rabbit out of a hat. That's what that is.
Yes.
It's almost if he wouldn't deal with Africa at all. You know, if I didn't have to go over there and get your natural resources, I'd leave you dying on the bank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I tell you, this is something that we see, and we're calling an ace and a spade, and we're calling his bluff. Now, we want you all to join us tomorrow as we come to you with more truth. Tell everybody about us and let everybody know that know about this platform. Also, as we often say at the beginning and we say at the end, time is the most valuable resource and commodity ever. Once you use up your time, you cannot get it back. So make sure that when you visit these platforms or when you undertake listening or viewing a platform, make sure you receive something in equal or greater value than your time, so that you will not be at a deficit when you have given your time, because you'll never be able to get it back. So on that note, we'd like to thank you all for joining us. Rashid, what do you have to say in closing?
Stay tuned.
As always, we'd like to tell you that we love you, but God would always love you best. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, stay righteous. And hey, mama, your baby boy loves you with all his heart. Deuces.